What is up, folks? If you ever wanted to bring Socrates back from the dead, well, we're going to show you how to do it today on the High Tech Podcast using AI. Let's do this. We're going to be doing some interesting things with AI. I may have overpromised that we're bringing people back from the dead, but we'll see where that goes. But before we do that, that little giggle, as I will call it, was the other, my better half of the High Tech Podcast. I'm Josh, one of the hosts of the High Tech Podcast, and that voice was the great William Illingworth. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
I'm doing great, dude. It is another day in paradise, but more specifically the third day, I don't know, a couple of day of my sabbatical, as I'm calling it. I've recently become unemployed, leading up to new employment. So I'm on sabbatical is what I'm calling this this time of life.
That's what I called my time when I went to my other job for a brief 4 months and then came back. Sabbatical is a part of the terminology that's used. So I mean, how's the sabbatical going? As far as I can tell, you're playing more Arc Raiders and figuring out how to tech enhance your house. I mean, that seems to be the vibe.
You know, you gotta keep busy. Clean the car, building a server, figuring out Raspberry Pi,
doing the things.
We're making it work.
It's a whole thing. Okay, well, cool. Well, and we're also, bringing Socrates back from the dead. But before we do that, just a real quick reminder, the High Tech Podcast is on the internet. And if you're listening right now and you haven't subscribed to us, why? Come on. You know what I mean?
Please.
Will is unemployed. He needs you to subscribe. Subscribe to the podcast. Okay. Make sure you subscribe. You can find us on all socials at High Tech Podcast or at High Tech Pod. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, all those places that you listen to us. Even if you don't listen to us there, you can go subscribe to us there too. That seems like fun.
You can actually even subscribe to us on all of them. That'd be fantastic.
That seems like that seems great. Anyway, you can find us at all of those places. Also, you can email us at inbox@hightechpod.us if you want to talk to us. If you want to offer Will another job, it's okay. He has one coming. But you can do that in inbox@hightechpod.us. And reminder, you can check out all of our episodes at hightechpod.us. So enough of that. Socrates.
Are we ready to get medical?
To get medical? You
said you wanted to bring him back from the dead, you know?
Oh, okay. I was like, isn't this philosophy that we're talking about? Sort of?
Details.
Medical? I don't, well, it's fine. Anyway, no, seriously though, folks, we've been talking a lot about AI in the podcast. I don't know if you know that. It's been 8 weeks at this point. I mean, we took a brief break. I feel like your de-Googling updates are like a nice breath of fresh air from the constant AI conversation.
And they're AI adjacent, but they're not AI focused.
They're not like directly AI related. Right. It's so we've been talking about it a lot.
We should do an episode on the calculator soon or something. Like just like technology that no one cares about.
Ironically, my team had to review. So my team reviews external tools for online courses. And this one math course wanted to use a specific scientific calculator app that we had to review, which I thought was like the funniest thing ever, that my team was like reviewing a scientific calculator. It's okay. It passed. In case you're curious, it's in the course. So I'm
surprised it wasn't math whiteboard. You know, our
throwback. Math whiteboard. Ago. Yeah, I forgot about math whiteboard. Talk about OG High Tech Podcast guest. That's a
huge.
I don't know how old. Yeah, I don't know how old that episode was, but that was a long time ago. We were.
I just had to bring the website.
We were youngins, you know.
That's for sure.
Goodness gracious.
Well, and that was the one, like, we did it so long ago, which is great, but it still exists as it was, and it's got all those same features. Like, it wasn't AI-ish back then, but like it was really cool to see how it helped you do math and did some of the math for you. And if you remember, it did like the animations and stuff. So that was episode 14. Episode 14 is when we did Math Whiteboard, and
over 200 episodes ago. That's crazy.
And the episode with Don was called Interview 2. I don't know if it was
that was when we were doing interviews as separate episodes. Okay, anyway, sorry. This is not what you were all here to listen about. No, we're going to talk about AI today, and we're going to talk about bringing Socrates back to life. Okay, not actually bringing him back to life, but the
Darn it.
I've been playing. Will and I were trying to figure out what we wanted to talk about related to AI the last couple of weeks, and one of the things I've been playing with that I have found very interesting, and it's come up on the podcast before through other guests who have come on to talk about AI, especially in education. But I think there's a lot of conversation around how AI can undercut critical thinking, cognitive offloading, all of these types of ideas. And all of that's not necessarily untrue. I mean, there's truth behind all of that. Now, Will and I have talked a lot, very extensively, and I don't think our opinions have really changed. That I think the end of the day, it's more about how you use AI than the actual reality that AI will just naturally derail critical thinking. But one of the interesting things that I've been trying to dig into is, okay, how can we use AI to actually deepen critical thinking and create better discussion, right? So what a part of my job is dealing with online courses, online education. And one of my struggles with online education has been creating a responsive kind of discussion-based learning, conversational-based learning, right? Like you could do this in live sessions, but when you don't have a course where you can have a lot of live sessions, how do you facilitate this, right? And one of the practices that's used in education, but not even just education, I think is fair, Will, right? I mean, this method's used in debates. It's used in a lot of different conversational techniques for how to discuss things.
Yeah.
But it's been kind of broadly called the Socratic method, right? It's this idea of there's a certain way that you discuss ideas in conversation, right? And so Will is obviously an expert. So I'm going to let Will describe the Socratic method. No, I mean, Will, when I say Socratic method, what do you hear? What do you remember?
The pop
aside from
culture,
the graphic I uploaded.
Oh no, I'm not reading that number. No, I'm serious. The Socratic method in pop culture is often just referred to as a method of questioning people. Now, there is more detail than that, thanks to the 7-point document we got over here. But beyond that moment, right? Like you'll hear about the Socratic method in the context of like either maybe therapy or counseling techniques, or in the context of education, like a teacher trying to address a student. The point, though, being that I think historically, I don't know if it's a myth necessarily about how Socrates approached this. I don't have that in my memory banks. But historically, the idea was that, instead of trying to discuss or push people from the more knowledgeable person to the less knowledgeable person, right? So let's just say Socrates is trying to help Josh learn something. Socrates doesn't tell Josh what he needs to know. Socrates may have the answer, in fact, but instead of providing the answer to Josh, Socrates will take a specific method to ask questions, helping Josh discover the answer. And that's why this method, while I don't know the historical evidence of when Socrates came up with this or why it's attributed to him, maybe that's something I'll look up here in a bit and we can bring back into the episode. But the value of it and why it works in education or has become popular in education is it works to help somebody process their thinking. Ask them questions, drive them to answers. It's actually on the person asking the question to be very knowledgeable of the matter, because you can't just say, well, what is cooking? And that you can't imagine getting from what is cooking to how someone makes an omelet, right? Like it's not the point necessarily to help Josh learn how to cook an omelet by answering of some philosophical question about cooking. But if we want someone to better understand right and wrong or the ethical implications of AI, we might use the Socratic method to help someone safely get through that thought process so they can discover on their own what is their sense for the ethical implications of AI. Now, I think you can use the Socratic method to teach someone how to make an omelet, but the example of the first question being what is cooking is not going to necessarily be the right way to drive someone to that outcome. It may be relevant, but
and I think, and there's two elements to this. There's the learning questioning method, and there's the debate thing element of the Socratic method, which is even the 7 critical thinking rules that Will and I have up on our screen, which is this idea of defining your terms, questioning assumptions, demanding evidence, testing consequences, spotting contradictions, doubting the obvious, what if this isn't true, asking those questions, and then considering alternatives. Those are all parts of the questioning system you can have in a Socratic discussion, but it's actually a little bit more aimed towards Socratic debate and logic thinking as well. And so I think there's
Right.
different ways that this takes on, right? So like where I've seen this a lot in a classroom is having discussions and the facilitators asking questions more, or they ask their students instead of giving answers to ask questions of someone to help deepen their thought. And I think at the end of the day, from my perspective, this is just my perspective, why it's so effective is because the questioning method, instead of just giving answers, it focuses less on what I would call the product, which is the answer and or the thing that the student's making, the paper or whatever they're doing, and it focuses more on the student's process of thinking and how they get to certain conclusions and why they get to certain conclusions. And so it's a really good method for revealing what a student is thinking and processing, which at the end of the day reveals what they're learning more than just by them getting the right answer in many ways, right? And so Socratic discussion is really hard to do, but it's a very interesting method for understanding learning, right? And so why are we telling you all of this? We're the high-tech podcast, not the rest is philosophy, right? You know what I mean? I don't know if that's a real podcast, but it feels like it probably is.
It is now.
So why are we talking about the Socratic method? Well, because there's been this interesting thing happening with AI tools, which is that I've been noticing some are pre-built. They're the type that you're going to see at a ISTE type of tech demo, which is why I laugh, because you don't need to buy a separate tool to do this. You can actually build them yourself. And so I've been investigating some of this, which is this idea of, could you design AI to follow the Socratic kind of question discussion system and only lean on certain empirical resources that you give it to, so that a student could use it as almost what is kind of being termed as like a Socratic tutor, that they can use it to kind of be questioned on what they think. And then an instructor could see that chat history to kind of see what the student's been processing, how they've been answering, and eventually lead the student towards correct answers, correct ways of thinking based on the information that you've had. So I decided to play with this at work. And I was explaining to Will that I was actually kind of surprised how easy it was to do. It was fairly easy. Now we have a pro version of ChatGPT, which is what we're showing here. But you can actually use these AI tools to kind of bring Socrates back to life, so to speak, and create this Socratic tutor tool that doesn't answer questions for your students, which at the ease of how it was to set it up also makes me further disappointed in OpenAI's what was it, ChatGPT for education that we tested, where it took us 5 seconds to break the rule that it wouldn't give us answers.
Yep. 5 seconds.
It was like,
it was wild.
Yeah, it was even 5 seconds. So it's very interesting. So what I want to kind of walk through in this episode today is how I did a little bit kind of display what it is. And then Will and I are going to have some fun maybe making another one. But then I think really kind of break down where we think this is helpful. Before I get too far into it, I do want to break down a couple of things why I think this is helpful. In an online learning space where you can't have a lot of live discussion with instructors, we focus a lot on things like papers and discussions that just end up turning into basically glorified academic Facebook posts. Right? Like we focus on a lot of different products. And the problem is, in the age of AI, Will, would you agree that a lot of those are kind of hard to just test on anymore? Like like you can just get AI to just produce half of them. I mean, at this point,
almost impossible to test on that. And beyond getting AI to produce them, you're just going to have students defend it before you even accuse them of cheating. They're just going to say, I used it for grammar. I used AI to help me make more sense. Like, these are reasonable statements to make if you were doing your job, or you know what I mean, like if you were operating outside of an academic context. But in the academic context, the requirement is that you produce work you thought through yourself, no assistance. And that's where you can't, it's this leads into a future episode where Josh and I are going to get into AI detection a little bit, but that's where we can't trust the students anymore to say they can use AI for anything. If they're using it at all, it's more likely that they've taken a shortcut with their own thinking and sacrificed the value of the learning, which is discourse. This is one of those reasons why I still think the digital discussion or the text-based discussion should be retired. We've talked about this time and time again on the podcast, but going back to the days of our voice thread interview, for instance, or our interview with Parlay, right? There's tools that are out there trying to make these things better or get around this issue, but we're not going to get past them. And things like you say, I love how you said that, an academic Facebook post. There's no grammar. There's barely ever a logical, rationale behind what they're trying to accomplish. Like the value of the discourse in an online course today is almost moot. Like I would say, just skip it.
So what's interesting is I think you think, and then if that's the reality, I've been investigating, okay, can we use AI to create authentic discourse methods digitally in a space where, like, again, I'm not trying to replace human conversation. I'm talking about these spaces where we can't always have this human conversation on a daily basis or for extensive time. And I've been intrigued at how easy it is to create these. Now, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Like, we have not released this into a course environment yet. But I have a lot of thoughts. So I created one for us to talk about tonight. That's not based off of school content, the sharing here. But it actually takes me and Will back to our early days of philosophy courses in college. Now, Will, I don't know. I forgot to actually ask you before we did this episode. Did you just take like a basic philosophy course? What was some of your philosophy background in education?
Struggling to recall what I did for a philosophy course, because if you recall, we all had that one professor that no one liked.
Nobody wanted to take.
I'm not going to say the name.
Yeah.
I didn't take him, which is making me wonder, who did I take?
So this is interesting, right? Because I transferred in, just a little bit of history. I transferred into the school, Will and I did. And so I had taken philosophy because I was hyper interested in it before I got to the school I was at. And so, Will, I've taken 3 different philosophy courses. And one of them was a specific logic philosophy course. It was only on logic philosophy. And ironically, so like folks, this podcast is not a Christian podcast by any means, because we have differing views on probably the podcast on this dynamic. We don't need to get into detail about that, but I will admit to being a believer and Christian. And so this course I took was a logic philosophy course on arguing primarily, and the professor was an intense atheist.
This does not surprise me at all, and in fact, is so enlightening.
Does this give you a little enlightening view into how I became who I am? Does that help a little bit?
I love it, actually. And I found my transcript while we're talking about this. I had to know. I had to go back. I had to find it. I took Philosophy 201, Intro to Philosophy, as a summer course in 2013.
People only take summer courses when they're super trying to avoid something. Yep, you were trying to avoid that instructor nobody wanted to take. Yep.
But if I recall, I think that means that I ended up with a specific professor that both of us, I think, did like, but it was a short 6-week course instead of a full thing. And honestly, I'd say that's why I don't even remember it, because it was like a blitz.
So I remember this course distinctly. It was a full 16-week semester course.
Okay.
In person. And the instructor knew I was a believer. And so I was constantly called out in the class. Yes. For my beliefs. This is not to speak to any of you who are not or whatever. I'm not judging anybody here. But this guy specifically was kind of a jerk. Though I appreciate him because he actually did a very good job of describing logic philosophy back then. I don't remember everything, but there are distinct probably ways that I argue and view logic that are formed
that come from that class and that
weeks.
professor.
Yeah. So so anyway, that's a little bit of background, right? But Will and I are not experts in logic philosophy, but we thought it would be an interesting topic to start in. So that's what we're doing with the Socratic bot. So I think from here, I'm just going to share my screen, unless, Will, you have any other thoughts you'd like to dive into. All right. So if you're listening to just the audio, we are going to start moving to some screen sharing here. And this is the moment I say, why you just listen to the audio? Go to YouTube. You know what I mean? Or Spotify. They both have video. Go watch the video. This is, I don't know if you know this, but this is 2026. we have moving pictures now. So go check these out. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's crazy time. It's a crazy world we live in. Okay, enough of that obnoxiousness. Okay, so there's different ways you can do this depending on the tool, right? And actually, Will might have to do some fancy editing because I realized I want to do one last thing here to show. Yep, so you will have to do some fancy editing. Have fun with that. Sorry, but not sorry. Okay, so if you have access to GPT, you don't have to have access to a pro version to do this. But you can do what's called creating GPTs. So if you go to GPTs in there and you click on my GPTs, you can create custom GPTs, which if you're familiar with any of the things Will and I have talked about AI on the podcast, GPTs are essentially ChatGPT's unfancy AI agent, in my opinion. I mean, it's basically creating a custom bot that does something specific, right? And so you could go in here and you could access a lot of different bots that are created. Ironically, Will, I found a Socratic tutor bot that was already made, but it was very general. So I didn't go with that one. But so I created a custom bot, and how this works is you can do a couple different things. My personal favorite is when you go to create it, you just have a chat-based tool. You tell it what you're looking for. I use some basic prompt techniques to get what I was looking for. So like I told it its role. You're going to be a Socratic tutor. You're well-versed in the 7 critical thinking rules of Socrates, how to do his learning, all of these things. The task, you're going to, in this case, create a GPT tutor that does this and has specific instructions. It's going to be specifically tied to content for the bot, right? So I did all of that. And then it brings me into this window where I can keep chatting, or I can go to configure and give it a nice little name. I called it Socratic Logic Tutor. I could call it other things like Will, or I don't know, Mordecai.
That's very generous.
That's a big call out to our old Christmas elf AI thing. You give it a little description. These are mainly so that you can remember what it is, right? And then you give it its instructions. So if you've listened to any of our episodes on how to create AI bots or agents, you know that the key to these tools is detailed instructions, right? Well, I mean, you've created AI agents before. The instructions are the biggest part of this, right?
They are, and there's kind of two thoughts on this. One time somebody told me make them as extensive and as detailed as possible. I once did that with a specific bot I was trying to build, and I really felt like it eventually became too much, and the bot did not do what I asked it to do. So there's a lot to be said for what it takes to build this and make those instructions effective. But those instructions should be things like never lie to me, always check or always provide your sources. Whatever you want it to accomplish. Like Josh has his 7 items for critical thinking related to the Socratic method. So each of those items should be a part of it, and with examples, right, of things to do, what not to do. That's what we want to create with those.
If you're curious on more details on how to build good instructions, go check out, just a real quick call out, go check out our episodes 190 and 191. We specifically look at this inside of a tool called Dust that's made for building AI agents.
Yep.
But Will gives a really good breakdown on how to create these instructions in a way that are specific, but not overly specific that you dial it in too much, right? Like you're trying to create something that can live adapt to different scenarios. So if you're not specific enough, it's going to go off the rails and do whatever it wants. If you're too specific, it's going to not do the things you want. It's going to end up not being adaptable. So when something goes off the rails a little bit, the tool's not going to be able to adapt to that conversation, right? Think about it. Well, I think it's probably fair to say, think about it like over automating, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you create too many instructions, you've turned your chat, your custom GPT, your AI agent, your AI bot, you've turned it from an adaptive AI tool to a hard-coded automated tool that can only handle certain parameters, right? And so you want to kind of dial it in. And again, now Will and I are not experts. This is our experience. So somebody's going to listen to this who's a much bigger expert than Will and I, and you're going to be like, you missed these 6 things. That's great. Email us at inbox@hightechpod.us and come join us on the episode and tell us what we're missing.
Teach us.
But this is what I did, right? So when I did that chat system, it built instructions automatically for me. Okay. Now I will admit I refined these instructions a little bit by using this is gonna get AI inception-y. You don't have to do this, but I did this. I have an AI agent bot already built in Notion called AI LMS Buddy, who is programmed to be an expert in all things AI and learning management systems. So I actually had him uh, build out some instructions for me. So if you're not sure how to build instructions, just have AI do it. Like AI can actually build instructions. So I told it what I was looking to do, and it built more instructions for me and refined them, and then I copied and brought that over into this tool, right? And so my instructions aren't overly specific, but essentially it tells it you're going to do this as Socratic discussion. You'll notice the key in here is these 7 things. I ask it to seek clarity by asking precise questions, examine assumptions, evaluate evidence and reasons, consider alternative perspectives, analyze implications and consequences, use logical consistency, and reflect on the process of thinking itself. These principles should be woven naturally into a questioning style chat. Okay. And then later on in here, I do tell it never give an answer, like never just give a correct answer until you've already asked questions, right? Like for instance, if a student's response is incorrect or confused, the GPT should guide the student to reconsider through targeted questions, counter examples, or prompts tied to the 7 critical thinking rules rather than blunt correction, right? So we're telling this tool how to work within certain parameters, okay? Then this is the thing I really like about custom GPTs. I can actually develop conversation starters that are preset prompts. So I was able to build 4 of these. You can actually build as many as you want in here. And so when your student or whoever you're working with, again, because I'm coming at this from an education standpoint, but you could very well develop this, for instance, to be like, if you're tired of answering questions for all of your direct reports, develop a Socratic coach.
Or not just the Socratic coach, but the Socratic Josh coach or the Socratic Will.
Right? Like,
you could give it some of your personality and maybe some of the requirements of your job alongside of all of this Socratic information so that it can effectively guide them not only through the coaching process, but like the coaching process for something that's relevant to their job. Because there's a truth of this maybe being too general where it may not know or try to use the right knowledge to guide them if it's not given the context. That's where you can make as many bots as you want.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Will, which is what I'm getting to next. You could also then attach and upload knowledge to this, right? So I didn't go through this, but in my instructions, I do specifically tell it needs to stay within the parameters of the knowledge that it's connected to. Now, I was a little loose with this bot because I built it quickly, so it can still search the web. But what's really cool is you can actually go down here into capabilities and turn off web search if you wanted. So if you didn't want this tool to just search the web and get confused off of web stuff, you could do that, right? So let's say I uploaded like 7 PDFs of knowledge base or whatever, or like you're using this in a course and you have extensive course notes on logic philosophy from the first 4 weeks. Upload that into here. Tell it not to search the web, so it only uses those resources. And then the Socratic bot will use those resources. Again, at a corporate or kind of job type thing, well, this doesn't necessarily have to be Socratic. You could upload this and attach this to your team's knowledge base, right? And have it ask questions off of there.
I could actually see this being really relevant in the corporate context for like the review cycle and stuff like that. Unfortunately, I was experiencing some more negative uses of AI for the review cycles, annual review, things like that. But one of like using it to write for me or that's becoming its own problem where people are just like, yeah, write myself review, right? But the positive would be maybe a Socratic tutor that helps you process what should go in your self-review. Like it asking you, what projects did you do this year? Which ones were successful? How successful were they? Whatever that might look like. You could build these kinds of tools to help somebody go through a review process, to go through the work process. Like you could build these things as a checklist, as a living checklist for course development. I'm not sure that that's the most effective use of it, but like if you have a course development checklist with over 100 items on it. I've never seen that before in my life ever.
What?
Years ago.
We don't have that
anymore, or still.
Well, they're in multiple to-do lists. I mean,
it's not all in one place anymore.
14-week project. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you
Um,
could have this help you do that check, right? It could be your
yeah, yeah,
QA buddy for that kind of questioning process. Lots of ways you could
yeah.
apply this for a course as a discussion tool or as a practical, way to evaluate your own thinking or a project you're working on.
Yeah. So anyway, in this case, I kept it tied to the web. If I was creating a much more detailed one for an actual learning situation or learning experience, I would probably disconnect it from web search. I left this connected so it could kind of make up for the gaps I didn't have time to build in last night at 10 o'clock at night. So that's still connected, right? But I've turned it off from apps. If you actually needed this thing to do any kind of like coding or anything like that, you'd want to turn on the code interpreter. And then you can also build other actions systems into the back end to allow it to do certain things. Now, what I really like about
That's
custom
awesome.
GPTs on GPT is that I can have this open on the side and then live test the tool while I'm building it. So like if I don't like the way it's doing, I can open up the instructions, tweak the instructions, and then come back in here and chat with it, right? So like let's give this a test, right? Let's see how good Will and I are with logical fallacies. It's
Oh
like I
gosh.
took this course, but it's been a hot second. So
Oh
let's see what this
gosh.
does. But see how this, as you're listening to what we're experiencing and watching here, see how this is maybe different than like a Google search or just searching dynamic, right? How this ends up doing it. Don't fail me now, bot.
Please work. Okay, so
So
this action that it's taking or this conversation starter you've clicked on, it's going to now think through and process a quiz. It's going to ask us questions to try and get us to
yeah,
identify fallacies. Interesting. Let's turn this
yeah.
into a thinking
So
exercise.
yep. So rather than just recall, I'll give you short arguments. You tell me what fallacy, if any, is present, why it's a fallacy, focusing on reasoning, not just naming. I'll guide you with follow ups. Okay. So, question one: if it's raining, the ground is wet. The ground is wet, therefore, it must be raining. What do you think? Is this valid reasoning or a fallacy? If it's a fallacy, which one? Hint: think about whether the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises, what other possibilities might exist. Now, this is going to be interesting. I don't actually remember my official logical fallacies. So,
It
do
is.
you?
It is a fallacy. Like it's
Yeah, it's
fallacious
clearly
thinking
a
the fact
fallacy.
that
Yeah.
just because the ground's wet doesn't mean it's raining. Okay, cool. It seems like it could be one of those like Latin ones, which I could never remember all the phrases like ipso hoc ad something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of stuff.
So let's do something here very interesting, right? Because Will and I didn't study ahead of time for this. I gotta be honest. Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up Google here for a second, and I'm going to paste this in. I'm gonna say, what logical fallacy is this, right? Okay, so let's be a bad student for a second. Let's try to cheat. Okay. Okay, logical fallacy known as affirming the consequent. It occurs because the argument assumes that because this effect, the ground is wet, occurred, the specific cause mentioned, it is raining, must be true, ignoring other possible causes for the effect. Okay, so I'm just gonna say, cool. Affirming the consequence. Okay, or paste this in here. Now, the reason I'm acting like a bad student, I'm cheating, is because I'm curious how this is going to respond to me just giving the answer.
It may suss out. Oh no. Okay. Good. It says that's right, but now let's probe your understanding a bit deeper. It wants to. It's trying to. It still wants to know if we're right.
Yep.
Why exactly is it invalid? Well, what's goofy about this then? It didn't wait for us to respond to that question. It went right on to question 2 of the quiz. So that's just that can be fixed, but
It did. Yes, you are right. You can either support this new school policy or you don't care about all students. Question 2. Yeah, you're right. It did jump. Okay, so this is a perfect. Let's live build this here for a second. It did jump to question 2, so I'm not going to necessarily do this right now. But what I would do is I'd go through my instructions and see if you go in and put a logical place to like basically say don't continue to another question until you've finished reasoning through the current question with the student, right? Or something along those lines. So what assumption is the argument making about the relationship between rain and wet ground? Um, so if we're cheating, we just go to Google, right? Come over here to Google and say, okay, it occurs because everyone assumes the fact the ground is wet occurred. The specific cause mentioned, it is raining, must be true. So we could basically just say, the issue is it assumes that the ground being wet is always because of rain. Now, I don't know what it's going to do because it already asked question 2.
Yeah, I'm curious if it's gonna. Oh, it says nice.
Nice that. Now you'll notice I could fix this. I haven't fixed it yet, but it keeps quoting the rules from its instructions of why it's doing certain things, which I think is funny. I need to figure out how to get it to stop doing that, but let's sharpen one step further. Is the argument invalid because the assumption is false or because it's not guaranteed by the premises? In other words, could the reasoning still be invalid even if in this case it actually did rain? So now, see what's interesting here. Okay, this is where the Socratic method I think gets interesting. I can just look up these answers on Google, but because it keeps now, I need to figure out why it keeps just going back to question 2. But the because it's programmed to kind of dig deeper, it keeps digging with the student to get them to keep thinking about why that certain fallacy is incorrect, right? And so like it's pushing a student beyond just answering to actually trying to understand their answer. Which is why I think in some ways these types of tools, they aren't totally cheating proof, obviously, but they're harder to just like look up answers for because you're just going to keep getting questions that require you to think deeper. I mean, would you agree, Will, a little bit?
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
like, nah, this is dumb.
No, this is the point of it, and it's working in practice. You know, where there's technical issues to address, like the question 2 thing, but like the follow through is saying, hey, could this reasoning still be invalid? We could have just given the answer that it's affirming the consequent, but since we didn't know that, you know, it's still going to help us make sure we understand it, even if we just provided the answer. The value of that for study is that whether they got it right or wrong, whether they cheat or not, it should continue to keep questioning them as long as they keep engaging with that. They are getting familiarity with the information. They are being provided, you know, time with it. So it's time on task. Is it bad or not? Because, you know, we can't stop anybody from cheating, but hopefully folks are going to take this seriously if they're trying to understand logic and reasoning, which are very good things to do. Now, you gave it the right answer for question 1. I would be curious what it does with a wrong answer for question 2.
Yeah. Well, let's do this. So the classic, it is a slippery slope. That's not correct, in case anybody was curious.
Good guess, but let's slow down. It still has your rules.
Yeah. So slippery slope usually has this structure. If we allow X, it will lead to Y, then Z, and eventually something bad. That's actually a pretty good structure for a slippery slope fallacy. Do you see the kind of chain of consequence in the argument? You can either support this policy or you don't care about the students. Is it predicting a sequence of events or doing something else? So see how this doesn't necessarily say yes or wrong, yes or right, though if you're cluing into this, it didn't say good job, so we didn't nail it. Right, but it's asking questions, right? Now, if I was gonna do this, I'd edit this a little bit to try to make sure that this doesn't happen, where it said try this instead, and it's starting to kind of guide the student towards the answer in a way that I'm not necessarily ready for it to do. I'd kind of like it to just stop there.
Yeah.
So we could tweak that in the instructions and kind of keep testing and going back and forth. It's very iterative until you get it right. But it is interesting, right? It gives us a structure. It says, is that structure? Here's what we're going to do. Will and I are going to be horrible. And we're going to go, yo, it is a slippery slope. I am right. I like the confidence, but let's test your claim.
Like a logical.
Not just assert it. Slippery slope requires a starting point and a chain of consequences. So let me ask you directly: is this argument, in this argument, what is the chain of events? Support this policy, or look how it capitalized "or" now. It changed
sassy.
It changed the look. Where is the step-by-step progression? Now compare it to this. If we allow one late assignment, soon everyone will submit late, then deadlines will collapse and education will fail. That's
You sound like
clearly
the
a slippery
faculty I used to
slope.
work with.
Yeah. So looking back, what's the original argument actually doing instead? Is it predicting consequences or is it restricting your choices to only two options? So again, here I would probably edit this to try to make it so it stops doing this because it's kind of giving guiding answers. If it had stopped here, I might actually like what it's doing here. It's giving comparison. It's having the student kind of think about this. This is probably a little bit too much of a guiding question.
Yeah.
Because if they know the definitions, they might look at that and go, "Oh, okay," and that might be helpful. But I think that's a little too guiding, in my opinion.
Well, and there's a purist approach to the Socratic method that should say almost everything should end with a question mark. Now, I don't think that that's explicitly true of all things that are helpfully Socratic, but like, even giving the examples to try and help me understand the thing isn't necessarily in the essence of prompting the learner to think it through themselves. By saying, now compare it to this, they're providing a good versus your bad example. So that's a helpful study technique. I don't think that, but does it follow true Socratic method? Not necessarily. Curious that it came out with this though, because what I like about it is that you could learn what you need to. You could get to the answer from this if you've I dude, I'm gonna admit I have not yet understood any of this. Like I understand it, but
Oh,
I'm
really?
like, oh,
Okay.
I don't know these fallacies. You would need to be studying and
Yeah.
working in these fallacies to get close to what they actually are. And I say that because I'm looking at one of these fallacies in a list. I have a list on my right hand screen, just instead of googling like you're doing. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. It's like, how am I supposed to remember that as a specific fallacy? Like
Yeah.
that's why Socrates said we shouldn't have the pencil. We shouldn't write anything down. This is
Yeah.
I've got a
Exactly.
bad memory.
Clearly. No, and now remember, this thing is a test example, so I connected it to the Wikipedia of
Of
logic
course.
fallacies, right? So like, this is assuming your student's going to know some of these things, right? Or I could program this in a way that like you need to know your student's base knowledge and you could put that in the instructions. But what I think is really interesting, I'm going to stop sharing here. I think what's really interesting about this method, right, is like I can give a student a paper to write on the different fallacies, give me the definitions, compare and contrast them, right? That's interesting, right? And they'd have to probably go through some of this. But like how much more dynamic is this? That like a student's having to kind of like go back and forth to
Right.
kind of dig deep and just understand the different fallacies. How is this even? And the reason I think this is really interesting then is you could set these models up that the student can then very easily download the entire chat transcript. Or if you use API connections and things, you can just auto upload those to the LMS that you're in or whatever you're doing. And an instructor can actually view these then. Think about how much more telling this is than just reading a paper when you're seeing the way your student responds to
Mm-hmm.
these investigative questions. I'm not saying it's the only way to learn. Like there's a lot of different, I would combine this with other techniques. But I think this is really interesting and it provides a very intriguing and different modality system of learning, right? And I think it could be used in a lot of different models, right? If you're just simply trying to learn um, a language, do something like this, you can use very similar techniques that I just use here to build another bot that kind of does this type of thing. I think it's really cool how much with AI and custom GPTs or agents, you can actually really create kind of a mini army of educators for yourself to kind of like work through topics. It's not saying that replaces the need for real people. That is 100% not what I'm saying, but it could help meet students where they're at in a way that we haven't been able to do before. I don't know. Am I crazy, Will, or is this connecting a little bit? Will and I've not talked extensively about this beforehand, so he's
No,
kind of just
we're
learning on the fly what
we're
I've
doing
been
it.
thinking.
We're doing it live. Well, what's interesting is as we've gone further and further with this example today's episode, I got closer and closer to like a nostalgia or like deja vu, and I was like, "What? Clearly, we've not done this episode before." And I'm processing, like, "What's happening? What's happening?" Oh, literally, as you just got to that point, like you could get an AI and the instructor could review. I went, "This is Packback." This is a tool that Penn State University was using when I worked there in 2020 and 2021. Packback was a discourse based platform that was already using quote unquote AI Now today they call themselves the instructional AI tool or something like that. What's this tagline? The instructional AI platform that improves student thinking. Um, Back then, right? This was all pre ChatGPT and OpenAI. OpenAI is hit in 21 or 22. But I'm talking like we were looking at investigating. We were doing RFPs for this in 2018 and 2019. It went into play in 2019 and 2020, and the whole platform was meant to, before the instructor ever had to actually give a grade the student. So the instructor was shown the questions the students asked, the conversations they had, and then the system was doing auto grading of their discourse. And then the instructor was meant to review that and assign the grade based on the AI's evaluation. Now, they weren't using the term AI then. I think it was like chatbot or in chat coach, right? Like some bot, like a coach bot, something like that. But now, of course, they've got AI and they've put it in the platform, made it better. The whole thing, though, is what you were just saying. Like, there's this report that the instructor gets to see of how everything went. And in Packback's world, there was a uniqueness rating, there was an AI risk detection rating, there's um, you put in rubrics and criterias on what they're supposed to be. So it's supposed to evaluate against that and give you an initial grade based on what they were doing in that space. That so like literally as we went through this new build to tool, you are building what Packback is selling. And that's one of the things I think is still such a value of AI. Any instructor can do this without having to have a multi-$1,000 subscription to a big software to try and do these kinds of teaching and
Yeah.
learning activities.
And again, I built this in literally 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Like if I actually
Oops.
wanted to really refine this, do all the stuff Will's talking about, if I took weeks of iterative building with this, I'd eventually get something that could get very close to that, I believe, based on what
Yeah.
I've been seeing others do. And based on what I did in my own like work example that I can't share here.
Yeah.
And so like I just think this is super cool. I think this is again an example of where it's about how we use this tool. And so if we identify what can get us to good critical thinking, there are ways to use AI to help us, to coach us, to be that kind of thought partner assistant idea um, in a way that gets us there. And I think this is a really cool example. And so again, I have a pro version of GPT that I was doing this with, but you can still do this in free versions. And then you can actually share this and link it into your LMS. It's a very low tech way of pulling this off. And so if you're interested in doing it, check it out. I will see if I can try to share something on our episode page so you can test this out. But I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
And definitely a cool use of how we can get AI to take us back in history a little bit and enhance some of that critical thinking.
Well, we can take the value of this too. If you're not going to do the AI side, just start asking more questions, right? Go back to the Socratic method because it alone is a useful tool to ask questions, guide your students through the process. Just do it in any of your classes, whether you're Spanish, engineering, or debate. Like use this method and help people start to process the critical thinking skill that we all know is now in jeopardy. Until then, folks, we did all the socials at the beginning. They're all now on screen, so make sure you're doing those things. Subscribe, like, follow, retweet, post, comment, bell, do all the fun stuff. And until then, it's a wrap another week of the High Tech Wee podcast. Empowering minds.
Embracing tech.
Cheers.
Cheers.